everybody. Welcome to Be Empowered, the podcast. This is a podcast where we dive into the realities of healthcare and entrepreneurship. We offer our opinion, unfiltered, unapologetic, and always with a dose of empowerment. We're here to amplify voices, yours and ours, challenge the status quo, and explore what it truly means to thrive. So let's get into it. I'm Dr. Santoshi Bilakota.
And I'm Dr. Shala Mokbel.
And today we're going to be talking about why physicians are bad with money. So this, I think, is a very important episode because it is something that I think as physicians and as healthcare workers that we're all dealing with. We have financial struggles, and I don't think the general public seems to realize why that is because it used to be very different historically. So during this episode, we'll briefly touch on what has changed and what the current situation is. I think there's a lot of stereotype of doctors sitting in their penthouse suites with like their fancy cars, but the reality now is there are a lot of doctors who are struggling with money, having trouble affording to live in the cities that they work in. So, the purpose of this episode, again, is to understand the history, the statistics, and where we are now. In the end, we'll offer some solutions about how we can improve financial literacy of medicine. Shala, I know you live in Walnut Creek, you live in the Bay Area, I live in New York City. These are both historically very expensive cities. What is your perspective on the physician salary, and is it enough to live in these very high cost regions? For me, I'll answer first. New York is very tough because physicians are not paid that well either. A lot of my colleagues live in outer boroughs that are not Manhattan, and the ones that do live in Brooklyn or Queens don't live in the fanciest areas because, again, the people who actually are wealthy in our cities are not physicians or healthcare workers. They're in tech or they're in finance. How about yourself?
Yeah, it's very similar in Walnut Creek or Silicon Valley. And we're a little bit outside of Silicon Valley, but we are in the vicinity of Silicon Valley. It's the same. Basically, those who can afford the multi-million dollar houses are mostly in finance or tech. And these days, you don't see a physician owning, a large house. In fact, it was interesting because through my kids' school, we have a lot of events that parents host. And there were a few events that we went to, and their houses were gorgeous, but none of them were physicians. And I was telling my husband, back in the days, you would see physicians owning these kind of houses, but that's not the case these days. It's tougher when you are dual physician household, yeah, because then both of you have that loan burden, which is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And both of you are struggling with, well, I wouldn't say struggling. The question is it enough? Yes, I would say it's enough. Okay. But it's not that lifestyle that we all imagined or other people, the public, imagine us to have, right? It's not like that. I don't go on business trips, for example. I don't buy expensive stuff or brand names. I try to save, and I don't, I travel a lot, but I travel economy. I am very cognizant of what we're spending. Doctors can have reasonable or good lifestyle, but it's not luxurious, these days. And it depends on specialty too.
I mean, I want to be clear. We're not complaining that we're poverty stricken. That's not the point of all this. I think we definitely have enough. And compared to the average American and the general public, we are doing well. We kind of entered medicine not because we wanted this very luxurious lifestyle, but even if we were not going to make that much money, I think we would be afforded the respect, and maybe even some prestige because we are doing important work. I do want to emphasize that the majority of us, I'm not going to say everyone because I can't speak for everyone, the majority of us came into this with good intentions to help people. Increasingly, I think medical school is becoming a little bit more predatory where they're charging a lot of money. And it's not just medical school, it's ERAs, it's exam prep, everything that you do as a med student costs thousands of dollars that you don't have. And then you're doing basically indentured servitude in residency. And then you think finally that's over. You can maybe travel business once in a while, right? You can live to a certain lifestyle because the value that you're providing to society is good. You're putting your welfare at risk a lot. I mean, look at COVID, you're putting your life at risk. And COVID is maybe an extreme. Day to day, you're putting your license at risk to get sued. So your medical malpractice is high. The risk of you losing everything is high. So if you're taking that kind of risks, you want at least some kind of rewards. And I think back in the day, we used to see physicians living very well. And again, this is not me saying that that's the standard. Like, oh, I want to have like a vacation home. I want to have like this. I want to have that. No, what I'm saying is I want to be able to live a good life, a good, comfortable life day to day, and not worry about retirement and not worry about paying my child like tuition. If I want to send them to private school, I should be able to do that, right? Because I spent what, 20 years trying to hone this craft. So again, going to your point, we're not poverty stricken. We are comfortable, but we are working very hard for that comfortable money. And there's a lot of people around us who are not doing things that are as important, who might be doing better.
You see the trend changing, right? Because I remember when I first was doing medical assistant jobs for physicians, and whenever I was invited to the physician's house, internal medicine physician, and this was about 20 years ago. When I went to their house, it was a big house. It was nice. They did have their kids in private school, and the wife was a stay at home wife. So the change has been drastic, but now when you see the new grads or younger physicians, it's not the same. At least in my area, it's not the same.
Historically, physicians were among the wealthiest professional, and that was a lot due to private practice models. We did not have this many administrators or middlemen trying to tell physicians how they can practice medicine. And that really shifted in the mid 20th centuries when increased regulation, insurance became more complex, and the reimbursement rate started declining. So, what you have now is physicians are working harder than ever, but they're feeding all these other people's salaries, like the administrators, the medical assistants, the office managers, the billing people. So you're working hard, you're getting a smaller piece of the pie, and at the end of the day, insurance might not even reimburse you. So it's kind of like really, I mean, it went all the way in the other direction where I think maybe physicians were living too luxurious a life and the general public saw us in one way, but now uh, the medical mistrust is still there, but we're not even kind of getting to enjoy the fruits of our labor per se. Um, and so the medical training, I think, and a lot of people, when I see folks commenting about this online, they say that, well, medical professionals, you guys are like lawyers, engineers, everyone has that, everyone works really, really hard. But I would say this, unlike the lawyers and the engineers, physicians start earning very late. And I don't think people realize this. After medical school, where you're not making any money, and most of us, I went straight from college to medical school. So I was done at like 24, 25. At that point, like I had made zero money, right? Because I wasn't really working that much in college either. And then you do residency and you're finally getting paid a certain amount. But I was getting like maybe $50,000 for working over 100 hours a week, which is which okay, I can't I can say $50,000 in North Carolina at that time might be average minimum wage, but if you throw into that all of the sleep deprivation, the long nights, the call that we're doing, I would say I was even working more than 100 hours, right? So you put in that much effort and then you finally become an attending. I think after fellowship, I became an attending at like 30 or 31. That's when I had started a 401k. That's when I started having savings. Until then, I probably had maybe $5,000 to my name. And then that opportunity cost, those 8 to like 15 years of low income and no income, I think about how much more money I could have had if I had worked any other job and had a 401k or had savings, right? So I think that delayed gratification mindset that we have when the gratification isn't there when you finally get there, it's incredibly frustrating.
Right. And the other thing is that the medical school debt is accruing interest, and the interest on that is close to 7%. And these are public loans. And I can't even imagine people who are having spent on their credit cards, during their medical school years. So that's again a lot of money that's just gone. And then you have to, after you're done your residency, maybe if you can during residency, you start making payments for the loans, so it doesn't accrue a lot of interest. But many of us cannot do that. I mean, during residency, as you said, it's not that much of a income, so it's very hard to start paying loans. I mean, I started paying because I wanted to do the PSLF, which is the public service loan forgiveness plan, and I wanted to do that, so I started paying from residency, and it was an income-based payment, so I was able to do it. But not everyone is able to do it, and not everyone is able to qualify for the PSLF, the public service loan forgiveness. I mean, it was always unknown. I remember that every time someone mentioned it, or a financial advisors mentioned it, they always say, it might go away. We don't know. So it's on our risk. It's basically a risk that some of us are willing to take, or some of us are not willing to take, and want to pay the loans off quicker than that. I wanted to take that risk because there was no way for me and my husband to be able to pay off several $100,000 that we had, with a 6.7% interest rate. I mean, there's just no way. We couldn't buy a house. We couldn't, I mean, forget about private schools, like even public schools, they need donations, they need money for field trips. You need to pay for their aftercare, because aftercare is not cheap, or it's not even free. So all of these, I mean, every month I have to pay money for the public school. It's something, right? And I'm happy to pay it because I'm donating to my kids' school. But at the same time, this notion that we have to save money for public school and for private school, and public school is free, it's not. You still have to pay for a lot of things. So all in all, I agree with you that the years that are gone, we have to factor those in, basically, and compare to other peers who went to finance, who went to law school, who went to other, professions in tech, or any other higher profession. Um, I don't think we are in the best shape, I would say.
Money aside, I think even the networking that some of these people were able to do in their 20s, right? Like if you're doing something, if you're, going to business school or law school, you still have you're making friends, you are talking to people who are doing other things, you can network. Or even if you're not going to grad school, even if you're working a regular job, or if you're traveling or backpacking, you're making friendships, you're making connections, and those friendships and connections can get you somewhere. I'm not saying medical students are not making connections, but we are very like pigeonholed. We live in tunnel vision. When I was done, I didn't know anyone who does anything other than medicine. I think that's what I'm trying to say. It's very difficult because you live in your own bubble, whereas a lot of other folks have lived a more like wholesome like existence. Like they know more things. They're more cultured. Like we didn't know anything. I mean, just to segue to our next topic, I wanted to talk about like poor financial literacy. I didn't know too much about finances. I never bothered to learn because I was stupid, because I figured this is what I want to do. And at the end of it, yes, I might have debt, but I'm going to be making enough money to pay it back. XYZ, and signed away on those very expensive private loans, which are very high percentage. Even the loans from like the public entities, the interest rates are quite high. I didn't really put one and two together to be like, oh, if I don't pay these back by the time I'm done, it's going to be double the amount I owe, right? And it's going to take me forever to catch up. I just didn't have that common sense, and maybe that's more my fault. I mean, thankfully, I have a father who's financially savvy, and he thought about it. But if you're someone who does not have that guidance, or you're from a family where you are lower income, I think that's going to be very difficult. The AMA released a statistic that only 21% of medical schools offer financial literacy courses. And I think this is very true. I my school did not have one. And the AAMC released a statistic that the average medical school debt in 2023, I'm sure it's gone up now, is $250,000. And that's just school. That's not money that you're borrowing for boarding, for food. So I think the average med student probably graduates closer to 300, 350 in debt. And a lot of people don't realize this. Um, that a physician, when they finally graduate and are making $300,000 per year, that's not automatically wealthy, right? Because you have $350,000 in debt. You're making $300,000 a year. So people would say, oh, why don't you just save up and pay it back lump sum? Well, it's not really that easy because there's interest rates on your loans. There's you have to buy yourself malpractice insurance. There's going to be some amount of lifestyle inflation. I'm sorry. People who say live like a resident, like that's just not realistic. I'm not going to eat rice and beans and live in a box. Like I can't do that. So
Right.
all of those things make it hard for you to catch up and be net positive financially.
How many residents that you know that could not finish residency, or they were diagnosed with an illness, so this living like a resident after residency, it might work for some people, but I don't think it works for the majority, especially after COVID. I mean, when COVID happens, like how many doctors lost their lives, right? They died. Maybe things have changed after COVID. Now we value our time better. We value our existence better. So no, I'm not willing to live like a resident. After residency, even during residency, I was engaged at that time. We decided to buy our house and commute to work. So each one of us would commute 45 minutes. It was a really good decision that we made. But even during that time, to save up, we were Airbnb-ing our basement floor. Okay. And I don't know if it was the best idea because I had these stories. Actually, I remember I was pregnant, okay, with my child. My husband was at work, okay, doing his night shift. And then all of a sudden, this person was not leaving the house, even though he checked out. And so it was really, really scary. And I had to call the cops, to get this person out of the house because they were not leaving. So you take some measures to save during residency, but they're not the best measures. Or I know my friends who during medical schools had roommates and they always had problems with roommates. So it's added stress, right? You have sleepless nights, you're high on coffee, roommates that may not be the same as you, or they might differ in opinion or views, and then that's added tension to your life. So it's not the easiest thing to say that, oh, save up and don't travel and don't do this and don't do that. So you're not in debt. Uh, I don't think it's realistic. I don't think it's practical.
I think people try to blame lifestyle creep as like a culprit. And honestly, I don't think I know too many doctors that are spending lots and lots of money on big mortgages or luxury cars or overspending. But that said, it probably does happen to a certain extent because when you had like minimum wage for into your 30s and you finally get a decent paycheck, it's possible that you want a nice car, you want a bigger house, and that I think that lifestyle creep probably does affect some physicians as well. But again, with poor financial literacy, you don't know what to do with your money. A lot of doctors um, don't even know how to do investments. They don't have an accountant or a financial advisor, and I'm not saying that's absolutely necessary, but you can fall into that lifestyle creep category. Medscape put out a statistic that 50% of physicians are living paycheck to paycheck. Now, I don't know if there's just looking at residents or attendings. But if this is actually accurate, I think that that's concerning. Obviously there's a late start, there's poor investment habits. Again, they don't get financial advisors or they get bad financial advice and end up in like high fee investment plans. So all of those things I think contribute to the poor money management. Um, and then the last thing I'll say is I think this is changing, but a lot of physicians tend to be risk averse. I know I am. So a lot of them would avoid investing. I know this is not the case for you and I now. We're pretty savvy with investments, but again, if you don't have the education on that and you're finally getting money, sometimes it might just sit in your bank account. You aren't exploring income streams. You're not exploring as investment opportunities. You're just relying on your salary.
Yeah, yeah, I did the same thing. So during medical school, of course, I mean, I didn't put any money into investments or 401k. But now, retrospectively, my advice would be to do it, to invest, even in Bitcoin. I mean, again, it's risky. And I have to say that as a disclosure, it's not always the safest option. But if there is any money kind of left, even a few $100s, I should have done it and I didn't during medical school. During residency, however, one of the positive things that happened is that our program director was very investment savvy, and he gave us kind of a lecture that talked about investment, talked about books that we should read, and it was really, really helpful. And I did invest right afterwards. I started reading those books and I started investing. That I was a third year resident at that time. So I'm glad that that happened, but I know most residencies, most medical schools don't have that. Again, my advice to new medical students to read investment books, start reading investment books even early on.
I mean, I started doing that much later. I got I got boggleheads and all of those investment book advices from actually like the Facebook physicians groups and the Facebook physician sidekick group because I didn't know what I was doing. I had to teach myself quite a bit of this. I think as we're getting ready to close out, I just want to summarize a few things. So we wanted to make this episode to talk about why doctors are bad with finances. And I think the biggest culprit is that we are now hospital employees. Physicians used to be private practice owners, they used to be business owners. Now I think like 80 to 90% of doctors are employees. And as a result, with all the regulation, they're making about 30 to 40% less than what doctors did decades ago. On top of that, you're burnt out because you're expected to see more. Financial stress definitely contributes to burnout as well, affecting your mental health. You have rising tuition costs, which are outpacing physician salary growth. And we've made episodes about how stagnant physician salaries have been. Universal loan forgiveness might be going away as well. So those are all the things I think that are affecting doctors now compared to like the boomer doctors who had little to no debt, less tuition, and they had greater reimbursements and salaries in relation to what they owed in debt. So the way to get around this honestly is to have financial literacy courses in medical school. Like physicians must take financial literacy into their own hands. This old school mentality of just working harder, I just don't think cuts it anymore. You can't just work hard and save. Like that's not going to do it. You have to invest. You need alternative income streams. And I think a lot of doctors just don't have that financial literacy. And I think that is probably going to be the root cause to fixing this issue.
Consider the path that you're taking. Okay, is it worth it? Give you an example. If you have the same amount of interest into two specialties, maybe you should then consider the specialty that gets you to your area in a shorter amount of time. So that consider that, because some specialties you do it for longer time, but it doesn't pay as well. I think it's worth considering.
Don't think in retrospect I should have done 2 years of fellowship. But again, when you're in there and you're doing it, it's really hard to talk yourself out of it because you think that's the right way to do. So there's a couple of financial literacy books and resources I can put in the caption of this episode, but everyone knows White Coat Investor. It's not always 100%, but he has some good points in there. Also, I want to say back to what Shala touched on, take advantage of Roth IRA and low cost index funds if you can. I wish I had because I think if I started a Roth IRA a long time ago, it probably would be worth quite a bit right now, but I didn't know. Um, Alternative income streams, real estate, side businesses, consulting, locums, those types of things I would look into early as well. Because if you are graduating with a lot of debt, your priority should be to try to get rid of that debt as much as you can. Given the current administration and the changes, a lot of stuff is not guaranteed anymore. And honestly, I think they're trying to replace physicians with lower cost APPs, which does not bode well for the future of our salaries and reimbursements. And yeah, I think this living like a resident thing is not something I agree with. I think you should enjoy life because you don't know when life is going to end. But I do agree with living within your means for as long as you can and as much as possible, putting away maybe 20% of savings if you can afford it, and putting it away in investments, side businesses, real estate, anything that can bring you some kind of passive return.
Think about long-term financial success. Track your goal, but also don't fixate on it because the goalposts keep moving, right? You have to be happy in what you do. When some people have a goalpost and they work so hard, and sometimes they accept to be unhappy in what they do just because of that. So I wouldn't recommend that either.
So you can't compare yourself to other people and what they're doing. At the end of the day, you have to live your life for you and your family. So you have to do what's best for all of you. Time is something you're not going to get back. So if you can make some smarter choices, make some investments while you're younger, even like $100 a month, I think would put you in a better position when you're finally in attending.
Make sure that you do tax efficient investing, or even start a S corp from the beginning, because if you, especially if you're doing locums jobs on the side, even during residency, if you are doing something on the side, you can actually start your corporation and do it under the corporation, so you can deduct a lot of the expenses.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. I wish I'd done that as well. I did not do that with my 1099 income early on because again, I didn't know. If you can consult a accountant, if you start doing 1099 work, I would highly recommend it. Save as much as you can, invest as smartly as you can, and I think focus on your happiness.
Yeah, that's a great advice. Um, Thanks for tuning in to Be Empowered, the podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't hesitate to subscribe, leave a review, and share with someone who needs to hear this. Stay strong, stay empowered, and we'll see you next time.